Hi, this is Jeff Ryan. Welcome to another chapter of Tales from the Cabin. Today I want to talk about a remarkable adventure that four young men took out of Michigan in 1899. There's so many aspects of this journey that make it truly remarkable. I hope you find it as interesting as I did. In 1897, a 17-year-old named Ken Ransom was already well into his first adventure, designing and building a sailboat in a shed behind his parents' house. Ken grew up sailing. His hometown of St. Joseph was the second busiest port on Lake Michigan. Yet building a 30-foot yawl was quite a bold undertaking. If that were the only thing Ken Ransom accomplished, it would have been impressive enough. But he was just getting started. Before he was even halfway done building his boat, he was thinking about where to sail it. One day, while bending a plank fresh from the steam box and securing it to the hull, he had an epiphany. He suddenly realized it would be possible to sail his new boat down to Chicago, to the Gulf of Mexico by way of the Mississippi River, up the eastern seaboard to New York City, up the Hudson River, then to the Erie Canal, back to the Great Lakes, and home to St. Joseph. It would be a 7,000-mile journey starting and ending in his hometown. Ken was sure of two things. One is that the trip had probably never been done before, and two, getting permission from his parents might be tougher than the journey itself. Ken's father came around to the idea far more readily than his mother, who reluctantly agreed, and only then because she thought the young man would lose interest in the mission anyway. But Ken had already recruited a crew. High school friends Frank Chauvet and Art and Clyde Morrow were now helping the captain finish his boat. It was then that Ken's parents delivered the news that they didn't want this adventure to ever set sail. But over the ensuing weeks, Ken persevered. Now the adventure had two things, a crew and a motto, which was painted on a board and nailed to the wall of the boathouse. Keeping everlastingly at it brings success. Built in only 6 months, the boys' ship, which they dubbed the Gazelle, slid into the waters of St. Joseph, Michigan, on October 27, 1898. It was later in the year than they would have liked, but the warm waters of the southern Mississippi River and Gulf of Mexico would theoretically welcome them when they needed it the most. As anyone who's undertaken a meaningful journey knows, the draw of the unexpected creates a kind of minute-to-minute energy. You never know when things will happen that will infuse the adventure with vitality or even danger. The boys had planned their overall route, but they left some of the details to happenstance. For example, they knew it was feasible to get from Chicago to the Mississippi River, but didn't know the ins and outs of navigating the channels in between. As it turned out, they would be sharing the Chicago River with significant commercial traffic, and came only inches away from being crushed against a steel wall by a grain freighter. After that, they gladly accepted a 96-mile tow down the Illinois and Michigan Canal to the vast, more navigable Mississippi itself. What they couldn't have planned for was that the crew of the Gazelle was about to sail into the coldest winter yet recorded in the southern U.S. The Great Arctic Outbreak of 1899, as it became known, formed ice floes on the Mississippi River and ice on the decks of the Gazelle as much as 6 inches thick. The boys spent significant time chipping ice off the rigging, negotiating the craft through the sheets of ice, and trying to stay warm. The ice cut through one anchor line, leaving them only one to rely on. South of St. Louis, the boys became iced in between two sandbars and could only wait for the warmer weather to release them. Trapped for 8 days, they ran out of coal oil, their only source of heat, and ran perilously low on food. Finally, enough ice melted that they made it ashore. Captain Ken Ransom and Arthur Morrow walked 10 miles one way in 0-degree temperatures to reach the town of Commerce, Missouri, collect mail, and buy supplies. Arthur got sick as a result. So delirious with fever was he that it took weeks before he started gaining strength again. The cold temperatures still would not abate. It was -5 when they reached Baton Rouge. Finally, with 1,800 miles behind them, they sailed into New Orleans in late April of 1899. Here they gained some semblance of warmth, but they also lost one crew member. Due to a death in his family, Clyde Morrow departed for home by train. At the halfway point in their journey and now facing a long sail up the eastern seaboard, the crew was down to 3. Captain Ken Ransom, Frank Chauvet, and Art Morrow, who had thankfully fully recovered from his debilitating illness. I'm sure the warm weather helped in that regard. By mid-May, the weather finally turned balmy for good. Instead of regretting their turns at the helm and the accompanying bitter cold, the boys now only ventured into the cabin to prepare food or sleep. The adventurers supplemented their diet with freshly caught fish. The trip around the tip of Florida and up the East Coast was far less harrowing than their journey down the Mississippi. Warmer days, more sunlight, and less boat traffic jostling for space certainly helped. On the 1st of August, 1899, they arrived in Norfolk, Virginia. From there, the Voyage of the Gazelle returned to an inland route for good. The Chesapeake River, Delaware River, and a pair of canals brought them to Philadelphia and subsequently New York City. From there, they sailed up the Hudson and entered the Erie Canal. Now the boys needed to employ their creativity again. The barge traffic on the Erie Canal in those days was steady, meaning that they needed to at least keep pace with the crafts behind them. They considered towing the boat themselves, but the reality of hauling the yawl 400 miles gave them pause. Instead, they found a derrick operator willing to pull the vessel's masts. They coiled up the rigging and then set off to buy a horse to tow them up the river. Step Lively, as he was named, cost $12 and moved the boat along at an 8 to 10 mile an hour pace per day. On day 12, they arrived in Buffalo, where they sold Step Lively for $3. By October 10, they left Buffalo and started their way across Lake Erie. Now less than 1,000 miles from home, they were racing the fall weather again, this time to get home. True to form, the autumn gales of the Great Lakes came thrashing. They just made the safety of harbors again and again, waiting out storms a few times, and were feared lost less than a week from making it home. But make it home they did, proving to themselves time and time again that keeping everlastingly at it brings success. It is an amazing feat to consider even by today's standards. Having the audacity, skill, and courage to build a 30-foot boat, sail it over 7,000 miles over a course almost certainly never attempted before, both are truly remarkable. The boys arrived to a hero's welcome at their home port. The captain and crew then returned to their families to settle into the lives ahead of them. So what became of them? Arthur Morrow became a druggist in the city of Kalamazoo, Michigan. Clyde Morrow became a millwright for the Ford Motor Company in Detroit. Frank Chauvet became a doctor in Jackson, Michigan. Kenneth Ransom became a crewman for the Alaska Steamship Company. He was on the ship Yukon when it ran aground during a blinding snowstorm in Johnstone Bay on February 4, 1946. All 496 passengers and crew were rescued before the ship split in two and sank. The Gazelle lived out her days as a fishing boat on Lake Michigan. To me, the journey of the Gazelle represents the ability to dream big, the importance of having your parents backing you up every step of the way, and doing something not for the notoriety, but just because you want to. If you like this episode, please consider checking out my books of my own adventures on jeffryanauthor.com, or you can buy me a cup of coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Jeffrey Ryan. Thank you so much for your support, and I'll see you next time.